The cold metallic clang of the prison gates closing echoed through the dim corridors of Darrow 6, a mining colony carved from a dead moon's crust. The air was thick with recycled breath, and the faint, ever-present scent of machine oil and despair. Kyla stood alone in the holding chamber, her wide eyes fixed on the harsh Vascari guards who flanked her on either side. They didn't speak to her, nor did she need to respond. Her muteness was a fact everyone acknowledged, but no one tried to understand. At 10 years old, Kayla's fragile frame seemed almost too small for the heavy restraints binding her wrists and ankles. But it wasn't her size that frightened the guards. It was the quiet defiance in her gaze, an unspoken challenge beneath her muted suffering. The Dominion had branded her a saboteur. The neurointerface module in the mining grid had malfunctioned hours earlier, and when the Vascari found the damage, deliberate and precise, they needed a scapegoat. Kayla, with her rare neurological disorder that made her immune to some Vascari, control implants became their target. Calibration, the lead Vascari officer declared coldly. The word was an execution disguised as mercy, a brutal process designed to strip away a prisoner's will and rebuild it under Dominion command. Kayla was dragged into the stark chamber, the walls pulsing with soft blue light from the neural suppressors, embedded within. The room was silent except for the steady hum of machinery, like the heartbeat of the colony itself. She was forced into a chair, a cold cage of metal and wires tightening around her skull and limbs. The Vascari tech whirred to life, attempting to read her neural patterns, to unravel the tangled web of resistance in her mind. But something was different about Kayla. The machines flickered and stuttered as her brainwaves pulsed unpredictably, like a wild storm in a sea of calm. She was not just silent. Her mind was a fortress. The lead Inquisitor's eyes narrowed. Mute, untouched by our will, he muttered, a rare note of frustration coloring his voice. Outside the chamber, the punishment was broadcast live to every screen across the colony and the surrounding mining complexes. It was meant to be a warning. Defy the Dominion and this is your fate. But as the calibration sequence deepened, something unexpected happened. Across the dark corridors and dimly lit habitation pods, humans began to feel it. A tremor beneath their skin, a ripple in the enforced numbness that had dulled their senses for decades. For a moment, the neural implants designed to suppress fear, anger, and hope faltered. Captain Elias Ward was among them. Once a soldier, he had long buried the rage and grief of lost comrades beneath layers of obedience and exhaustion. But now, as he watched the live feed, a raw, aching surge of pain and sorrow erupted in his chest. His hands clenched involuntarily, eyes stinging with tears he hadn't shed in years. This was no ordinary transmission. It was a wave of pure, unfiltered human emotion, flooding through the cold, digital cages of their minds. Ward knew in an instant, this child was different. Kayla's suffering wasn't just pain, it was a signal. A silent scream carried on the frequencies of the heart, penetrating the Dominion's control like a blade through fabric. The colony's broadcast systems began to glitch, brief, flickering, moments where the cold order of the Dominion gave way to something far more primal and dangerous. In the shadowed corners of Darrow 6, small clusters of workers paused, their expressions shifting from apathy to confusion, then to something approaching. Hope Kayla's eyes, though mute, shone with a quiet fire. The world might have labeled her broken, but within her was a spark, one that no chains or calibrations could extinguish. And as the colony trembled under the weight of her silent suffering, a single, undeniable truth took root. The Dominion's reign was not as absolute as they believed. Captain Elias Ward sat alone in the cramped quarters of the mining station, his rough hands clenched around a chipped cup of bitter synth coffee. The live feed from Kayla's calibration punishment still played on the flickering hollow screen before him, looping over and over in his mind like a relentless echo. The silence that once blanketed his thoughts had shattered, replaced by something sharp, urgent. He hadn't wept since the wars, the battles where he lost everything. But now his chest ached with a sorrow deeper than grief. something raw and unfamiliar. Watching that child suffer, silent and unmoving, had wrenched open old wounds, but also something new, a spark of hope. Ward's brow furrowed as he noticed the irregular pulse in the colony's neural suppression system. The broadcast wasn't just a warning, it was destabilizing the implants across thousands of workers. People were reacting, without knowing why, without choice. The Dominion's control was fraying. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of a secure message. He glanced at the sender. Dr. Nadira Kwan, once a brilliant neuroscientist, now hiding in the underbelly of Darrow 6. Ward hadn't trusted anyone in years, but Nadira was different. She had been a voice of reason and defiance. Even before the Vascari tightened their grip, the message was brief but urgent. Kayla's neural signature unique. It bypasses suppression. Meet at the old relay station. Now. Ward grabbed his coat and weapon, moving through the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the colony, past flickering lights and wary faces. Every shadow seemed to watch him. Every whisper seemed to carry danger. The Vascari minders were hunting for any sign of resistance, and aiding a suspected saboteur was a death sentence. At the relay station, a forgotten relic of Earth's communication network, Nadira waited, her eyes sharp, beneath the hooded cloak. "You saw it," she said quietly. "No need for formalities." Kayla's mind isn't just resilient. It's active, broadcasting something we can't suppress. Ward rubbed his stubbled chin, skeptical but intrigued. How? Why? Nadira pulled up a holographic display showing neural patterns, lines and spikes weaving a chaotic dance. Her brainwaves override the Dominion's implants. It's like she's transmitting raw emotion, fear, pain, hope, all in frequencies they can't block. Ward's jaw tightened. A child's suffering, spreading like a virus. Yes, Nadira said, and if we can harness it, we could awaken others. Ward paced, the weight of years pressing down on him. But how do we reach her? She's locked away in Vascari custody, undergoing that calibration. They'll break her. Nadira shook her head, determination flickering in her eyes. Not if we act fast. I've found old quantum relays, forgotten by the Dominion but still functional. We can build a network, spread her signal underground. Ward's gaze hardened. Then we have a mission. Find Kayla, protect her, and start a revolution with nothing but the truth of what it means to be human. Outside, the colony's metal walls seemed to hum with an uneasy energy. For the first time in decades, the air carried the scent of something new. Not just fear, but a fragile, dangerous hope. As they slipped back into the tunnels, Nadira spoke softly. You realize what this means, don't you? If Kayla's signal spreads, the Dominion's grip could collapse. Their mind control won't hold. Ward nodded slowly. Then we better move quickly, because if they catch her, everything ends. Far above, in the shining spires of the Dominion's orbital command, High Inquisitor Jal Oru watched the flickering images of Darrow 6. His pale eyes narrowed. A child's mind, he whispered, voice cold but troubled. A virus in our system. Find her. Eradicate the threat before it spreads. But somewhere deep inside, a whisper of doubt echoed. The Vascari had ruled through terror for centuries. But this child's silent suffering had awakened something ancient, something they had never understood, something unstoppable. The hidden corridors beneath Darrow 6 hummed with quiet urgency. Captain Elias Ward and Dr. Nadira Kwan moved swiftly, shadows among shadows, their boots echoing softly on cold metal. The air was thick with stale breath and the scent of sweat and machinery, but beneath it all something new was stirring. Hope. In the past week, the colony had shifted subtly, like a giant beast slowly awakening from a long slumber. Workers who once trudged with hollow eyes were now exchanging furtive glances, whispered words of defiance carried in the safety of darkness. At the heart of this burgeoning resistance was Kayla. Ward and Nadira's plan was deceptively simple. Use the old quantum relays to amplify Kayla's unique neural signature, the raw emotional broadcast that had disrupted the Vascari suppression nets. If they could spread it far enough and wide enough, the Dominion's control would unravel. But the first step was to find her. The Dominion's prisons were fortress-like, cold, silent places where even hope dared not linger. Yet, through whispered rumors and a few trusted contacts, Ward learned that Kayla had survived the brutal calibration. Though weakened, her mind remained intact, a beacon of raw emotion and unyielding will. They moved cautiously through the colony's underlevels, to the decrepit communication hub that housed the first of their quantum relays. Nadira's hands flew over consoles covered in dust and grime, coaxing life from machines the Dominion had long forgotten. Old Earth tech, she muttered, but it still sings. Ward watched as the equipment blinked and hummed, ready to carry Kayla's signal across the network. Around them, a small group of trusted workers gathered, engineers, medics, former soldiers, all united by one thing, the growing belief that freedom was possible. Nadira spoke with quiet conviction. Kayla's mind broadcasts more than pain, its memories, feelings, the very essence of being human. When people receive that, it cracks the Dominion's control. A mechanic named Joss, eyes wide with disbelief, whispered, "So, her suffering wakes us all?" Ward nodded. "It's not just suffering. It's the truth we've buried under fear and silence." The relay pulsed to life, a soft blue glow spreading through the room. Nadira began to tune it to Kayla's neural frequency, a delicate dance between science and something almost mystical. As the signal sent ripples through the colony's implants, small clusters of workers stopped their routines, their eyes glazing as long-suppressed emotions surfaced. Tears, anger, fear, raw and uncontrolled. Some gasped aloud, others clenched fists or stared into space, awakened from years of numb obedience. In one cramped habitation pod, a miner gripped the cold wall, trembling as memories of a lost daughter flooded his mind. In another, a factory worker's eyes burned with newfound rage. The whisper was spreading. Yet with each pulse of hope, the Dominion's shadow grew darker. Unbeknownst to the rebels, the Vascari High Inquisitor Jal Oru had dispatched minders, cold, ruthless enforcers designed to snuff out dissent before it could ignite. They were closing in. Ward's comm buzzed sharply, a terse message from a whisper scout. Minder patrols increasing near relay, possible compromise. Nadira's face tightened. "We need to move Kayla, now." "But where?" Ward asked, his mind racing. "There's an old maintenance tunnel beneath the colony's surface. Unmonitored. It's risky, but it's the only chance." As they prepared to relocate Kayla, the stakes crystallized in Ward's mind. Every step was perilous. Every moment could be their last. The Dominion had not only weapons and surveillance rule, they had fear, and fear was a weapon far deadlier than any blade. Yet, in Kayla's silent suffering, they had found something stronger, the fierce, unbreakable pulse of humanity. The rebels moved under the cover of darkness, winding through rusted passageways and forgotten shafts. Kayla lay unconscious in a makeshift medical pod, her chest rising and falling with fragile breaths. Ward glanced at her pale face. Though mute, she carried the voice of a revolution, a voice that spoke louder than any gunshot. Suddenly, a sharp clang echoed ahead. A minder patrol. "Hide!" Ward hissed. The group vanished into shadows, hearts pounding as cold eyes scanned the dim tunnel. The minders passed by, unaware of the spark slipping through their grasp. As the rebels exhaled, Nadira whispered, "This is only the beginning." Because, now with Kayla's mind broadcasting, the human spirit was waking. And once awakened, it would not be silenced. The night sky above Daro 6 was a black canvas punctured by distant stars, and the cold gleam of Vascari patrol ships slicing through orbit like silent predators. Below, the colony's shadowed underlevels churned with whispered urgency, but nowhere was safe. Captain Elias Ward led the ragged band of rebels through winding tunnels, every step measured, every breath a calculated risk. The minders, those relentless enforcers of Vascari will, were hunting them, and the hunters were closing fast. Kayla, still fragile from the ordeal of calibration, rested in a reinforced pod carried carefully by Nadira and two others. The pod's neural dampeners helped keep her mind from overwhelming the group with the raw emotional resonance she now broadcasted like a living beacon. But the very signal that empowered them was also a beacon for their pursuers. A sharp ping from Ward's comm shattered the silence. "Contact," whispered a scout's voice. "Minder patrols ahead, 2 squads." Ward signaled a halt. The tunnels ahead split in 2 directions, one leading to a maintenance shaft, the other to the abandoned hydroponics bay. "Hydroponics," Ward said quietly. "If we can hold that, maybe we can use the environment against them." Nadira nodded, adjusting the pod's settings. Her mind's already starting to interfere with their neural implants. The longer we stay close, the harder it will be for the minders to coordinate. They slipped through the corridors like ghosts, the only sounds their shallow breaths and the faint hum of machinery. Suddenly the tunnel erupted in harsh light as a squad of minders appeared, weapons raised, scanning for any sign of the rebels. "Scatter!" Ward barked. Chaos exploded. Nadira dove behind a pipe as lasers tore through the metal walls. Ward fired back with a stolen pulse rifle, his shots precise but measured, no reckless moves. The pod with Kayla was protected by Joss and 2 others. Moving quickly but cautiously, Ward ducked behind a console as a minder's grenade clattered nearby, exploding in a shower of sparks and shrapnel. His ears rang, heart pounding. He caught sight of one minder, a tall alien figure with pale skin and red eyes, advancing methodically, unflinching. The Vaskari were merciless. Every encounter meant death or worse. Ward's mind raced. They couldn't outrun them forever. Then a sudden idea struck. "Nadira, the old relay room. If we can make it there, we can boost Kayla's signal. Overload the minder's implants from the inside." Nadira's eyes widened. "It's a gamble, but it might just work." "Then it's the gamble we take." The rebels regrouped and sprinted toward the relay room, dodging laser fire and scrambling through maintenance shafts. The minders pursued relentlessly, their enhanced senses closing the gap. Inside the relay room, Nadira immediately began configuring the amplifiers, her fingers flying over ancient controls. Ward and the others barricaded the doors as minders pounded outside. "Kayla," Nadira whispered, activating the pod's interface. "We need you." Kayla's eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly with the eerie light of neural energy, though mute. Her expression was fierce, a silent plea to fight back. The machine hummed louder as Nadira channeled Kayla's neural patterns into the relay. Outside, the minders suddenly staggered, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Ward watched astonished as the alien enforcers faltered, some collapsing to their knees, others clutching their heads in agony. Kayla's mind was a weapon, and it was cutting through the Dominion's armor. But the cost was clear, the strain was immense. The pod's lights flickered as Kayla's energy surged beyond safe limits. "Nadira, she can't hold this," Ward shouted. "We have to buy her time," Nadira replied, sweat streaking her face. Outside, the minders regrouped, more cautious, now but still advancing. The rebels readied for a final stand. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the corridor, a trap set by a hidden saboteur. The blast threw the minders back, buying precious seconds. Ward seized the moment. "Fall back to the lower tunnels." With heavy hearts, they fled into the darkness, the relay room's hum fading behind them. Kayla's signal pulsed on, spreading through the colony's neural grid, awakening the oppressed, breaking the chains of control. But the Dominion's hunters were relentless, and the rebellion had only just begun. Ward glanced at Kayla's pod. She was their light in the darkness. Silent voice that could shatter an empire, and they would fight to keep her alive. The aftermath of the skirmish in the tunnels left the rebels scattered and exhausted. The narrow passageways of Darrow 6 were no longer safe sanctuaries. Every shadow seemed to hide a watcher, every sound a threat. But amid the bleakness, Kayla's signal pulsed stronger than ever, a fragile ember growing into a fierce flame. Captain Elias Ward sat beside Kayla's pod in a cramped, forgotten maintenance chamber deep beneath the colony. Nadira worked tirelessly at a makeshift console, her fingers flying over the flickering holographic interface. The pod's neural dampeners strained to contain the overwhelming energy Kayla's mind now radiated. "She's changing," Nadira whispered, eyes never leaving the screens. Her brainwaves are adapting and growing stronger. It's like she's learning to control the resonance. Ward's gaze remained fixed on Kayla's pale face. Though mute, her eyes burned with fierce determination, a silent promise that she would not be broken. Outside, the colony was trembling. Workers, miners, and technicians alike were waking from years of numb obedience. Kayla's broadcast was no longer just pain or fear. It was defiance, hope, and the raw pulse of human spirit. News reached the rebels of small but significant uprisings, factories halting production, miners refusing orders, sparks of revolt, igniting in pockets across the colony. The Dominion's brutal reprisals came swiftly. Security forces crushed demonstrations with ruthless efficiency, leaving bloodied streets and shattered lives. Yet, for every blow dealt, the whisper grew louder. "Ward's," calm crackled to life. Joss's voice, tense but exhilarated. "We've struck the power grid in Sector 12. They're scrambling to contain it, but the workers held fast. The signal, Kayla's signal, is everywhere." A grim smile tugged at Ward's lips. "Good. Keep pushing." But there was no time to celebrate. The cost of rebellion was rising. Nadira's console beeped urgently. Readings from Kayla's neural interface spiked alarmingly. "She's overloading," Nadira said, voice tight. "If we don't stabilize her, she could—" Ward shook his head. "No, we'll find a way." Determined, Nadira turned to a dusty storage locker and pulled out a salvaged prototype, a neural amplifier device, long abandoned but powerful enough to regulate Kayla's surging energy. It was their last hope. "We need to get this to her." "Pod," Nadira said. "And fast." The rebels moved quickly through the colony's labyrinthine underbelly, carrying the fragile device like a sacred relic. But the Vascari were closing in. A squad of minders descended on their position, weapons blazing with deadly precision. The rebels fought fiercely, desperation sharpening their resolve. Joss covered Nadira as she rushed toward Kayla's chamber, with the amplifier. Ward held the rear, exchanging fire with the minders. His pulse raced, every shot a lifeline. As Nadira connected the amplifier to Kayla's pod, a surge of calm spread through the neural interface. The wild spikes smoothed into steady waves. Kayla's breathing slowed and a faint glow radiated from her temples. "She's stable," Nadira breathed, relief flooding her voice. But the battle was far from over. Outside, Dominion forces launched, a brutal counterattack on the colony's main sectors, determined to crush the growing rebellion. The sky above Darrow 6 blazed with searchlights and the thrum of gunships. Ward's comm buzzed incessantly, messages of sabotage, rebellion, and hope flooding in from all corners. Amidst the chaos, Kayla's signal became a rallying cry, a silent roar that united the oppressed. In a moment of rare quiet, Ward looked down at Kayla's serene face and whispered, "You're the heart of this fight, little one. We'll make sure your suffering means something." Kayla's eyes flickered, and though no sound came, Ward felt the weight of unspoken words, of pain transformed into power. The Dominion's grip was tightening, but the flames of defiance were spreading, and in the darkness of Darrow 6, hope burned brighter than ever. The underground tunnels of Darrow 6 pulsed with nervous energy, a fragile heartbeat beneath the colony's cold metallic shell. Captain Elias Ward moved through the cramped passages, his senses sharp, every shadow a potential threat. But amidst the looming danger, a new power was rising, one that no chains or weapons could suppress. Kayla's mind, now stabilized by Nadira's neural amplifier, had evolved beyond a mere broadcast of pain. She was weaving a tapestry of memories, hope, and defiance that rippled through the colony's neural implants. Wherever the signal touched, people woke from their numb obedience, their spirits crackling back to life. In one habitation pod, a miner named Tarek sat frozen, eyes glazed with the Dominion's control. But then a flicker, Kayla's signal, seeped through the layers of suppression. Memories of his lost family surged back, laughter, warmth, Freedom. He clenched his fists, the numbness cracking. In the mess hall, a group of factory workers halted their tasks, their hands trembling as emotion flooded their minds. Murmurs grew into whispers, whispers into cries. Resistance was awakening. Back. In the rebels' hidden base, Ward gathered his makeshift council. Nadira projected a holographic map of the colony, glowing with dots where the whisper, the growing rebellion, was strongest. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Ward said, voice steady but fierce. "We're fighting to reclaim our humanity." Joss, eyes blazing, slammed a fist on the table. "The minders won't stop. They'll kill anyone who even thinks about resistance." Nadira's fingers danced across the controls. "Kayla's signal disrupts their implants, makes their minds vulnerable. But it's a double-edged sword. The longer she pushes, the more it drains her." Ward nodded grimly. "We have to protect her at all costs." Suddenly, an urgent alert flared. "Minder forces advancing on Sector 9, Joss reported. "They're hunting for the source of the signal." Ward's jaw clenched. "Then we hit them first. Sabotage their command node, cut their communication, give the workers a fighting chance." The plan was dangerous but necessary. Under the cover of darkness, the rebels moved like shadows, slipping past patrols, disabling surveillance. They reached the command node, a sprawling hub of blinking consoles and armored walls. Inside, minders stood guard, unaware of the approaching storm. Ward gave the signal. Explosions shattered the silence, alarms blared, and chaos erupted. The minders scrambled, but the rebels struck with ferocity born of desperation. Ward fought side by side with the workers, their faces set with grim determination. Outside, Kayla's broadcast intensified. The neural interference caused minders' implants to glitch, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. Amid the turmoil, Ward caught sight of a figure emerging from the shadows. A young woman, eyes fierce, a stolen pulse rifle in hand. "Rena," Ward breathed. She was a former Viscari engineer who'd defected after witnessing the cruelty of calibration firsthand. Now she was one of the Whisper's most passionate fighters. "We've got a chance," she said, voice low but resolute. "The workers are rising. We need to keep pushing." Together, they dismantled the command node's core, severing the minders' control over the sector. As the last circuits died, a wave of cheers erupted from the workers who joined the fight. The colony's metal walls seemed to hum with new life, a pulse of rebellion spreading fast and fierce. But victory was fleeting. Ward's comm crackled with a chilling message, High Inquisitor Jal Oru's voice, cold and unforgiving. "You cannot hide from the Dominion. We will burn your rebellion to ashes." Ward exchanged a glance with Nadira. The war for Daro 6 had become a battle not just for control, but for the soul of humanity itself. Kayla's signal pulsed steadily, the silent voice of a child breaking chains and shattering terror. And though the Dominion's grip was iron, the cracks were growing. The chains were beginning to break. The night air was thick with the acrid scent of burning machinery and smoldering hope. Deep beneath Daro 6's battered surface, Captain Elias Ward moved with grim determination. The colony was on the edge of collapse. The Dominion's retaliation was brutal, swift, and merciless. High Inquisitor Jal Oru had unleashed everything at his command. Gunships screamed overhead, their searchlights carving the darkness. Minders hunted through tunnels like ghosts of death, erasing anyone suspected of harboring the rebellion. But the whisper, Kayla's silent broadcast of defiance, pulsed stronger than ever, fueling the rising tide of resistance. Ward's ear group moved cautiously through fractured passageways, carrying Kayla's pod like a fragile heart beating against the darkness. Nadira's hands never faltered at the portable console, monitoring Kayla's neural energy, which now crackled with unprecedented intensity. "She's pushing herself too hard," Nadira warned, eyes tight with worry. "If this keeps up, the overload could kill her." Ward shook his head. "We can't stop now. The colony needs her." Ahead, a squad of minders blocked their path, weapons primed. red eyes glowing ominously in the dim light. "Prepare for battle," Ward whispered. The rebels sprang into action. Lasers cut through the stale air. Bodies ducked and dodged, and the echoes of gunfire bounced endlessly through the tunnels. Ward fought with the ferocity of a man who knew what was at stake. Not just his life, but the soul of an entire world. Meanwhile, Kayla's broadcast surged outward, disrupting the Minder's implants. The alien enforcers staggered, their movements jerky and uncertain, giving the rebels an edge. Still, the Dominion's forces were relentless. Amid the firefight, a sudden tremor shook the tunnels, a powerful explosion collapsing part of the ceiling and blocking the path behind them. They were trapped. Ward's comm crackled frantically. "Fallback road is cut. We need another way out." Nadira's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed fear. "I've detected a ventilation shaft system nearby. It might be tight, but it's our only chance." With no time to lose, the group scrambled toward the shaft, dragging Kayla's pod through the narrow space. The air was thick and stale, the walls slick with condensation. As they moved, Nadira's console beeped wildly. The neural amplifier was reaching critical limits. Kayla's pulse was weakening. "We have to stabilize her," Nadira urged. Ward glanced down at Kayla's pale face. The child who had sparked a revolution was fading, her suffering etched into every delicate feature. Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang echoed behind them. The Minders had found them. "Faster," Ward shouted. The rebels surged forward, crawling through the claustrophobic shaft as Minders followed with methodical precision. At the shaft's end, a rusted ventilation grate loomed, their only escape to the colony's surface. Ward pried. It opened just as Minders closed in. Emerging into the cool night air, the rebels gasped, blinking under the twin moon's pale light. But freedom was fleeting. Dominion forces flooded the surface, cutting off all escape routes. Ward turned to his companion's resolve hardening. "We fight, here and now." The colony's workers had gathered too, emboldened by Kayla's signal, armed with nothing but sheer will and salvaged weapons. A battle erupted across the broken streets, man against alien, hope against tyranny. Amidst the chaos, Kayla's pod glowed brightly. Nadira fought to stabilize her, whispering words of encouragement as if the child could hear. And then, in the darkest moment, something miraculous happened. Kayla's eyes snapped open, bright, fierce, alive. A surge of pure energy exploded from the pod, rippling through the colony's neural grid. Mind control shattered like glass. The Minders screamed, clutching their heads, dropping weapons. Workers roared with newfound freedom, rallying around Ward and Nadira. High Inquisitor Jal Oru's voice crackled over the colony's comm, cold and furious. "This rebellion ends tonight." But the colony was no longer silent. It was a storm, and it had just begun. The dawn broke over Darrow 6 like a promise. Pale light spilled across the battered streets, casting long shadows over a city transformed by defiance. Captain Elias Ward stood amidst the rubble, his pulse steady but heart pounding. Around him, the colony's workers, miners, engineers, medics, were no longer slaves to fear but warriors of hope. The Dominion's iron grip had begun to crumble. Kayla's pod rested at Ward's side, her frail body now calm and still. Nadira knelt beside her, eyes shimmering with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "She's stable," Nadira said softly. "Her mind has finally found balance." Ward reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Kayla's forehead. Though mute and small, she was the spark that had ignited a revolution. Her suffering transformed into the beacon that shattered tyranny. News of the colony's uprising had spread like wildfire. The Dominion's forces, disoriented and fractured, by Kayla's neural broadcast, were retreating or being captured. In the central square, a crowd gathered, faces marked by tears and dirt, but shining with fierce determination. Ward climbed atop a makeshift platform, the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. "People of Darrow 6, he began, voice steady and clear. "We have endured years of oppression, of terror and silence, but today, we stand together, free." cheers erupted, raw and joyous. Ward's gaze swept the crowd, lingering on Rena, Joss, and the others who had fought alongside him. They were more than rebels now. They were the architects of a new dawn. But Ward knew the fight was far from over. Hi. Inquisitor Jaloru's last broadcast had been a chilling threat, but it was drowned out by the roar of rebellion. The Dominion was vast, ruthless, and would not surrender easily. Yet the colony's spirit was unbreakable. Days later, Nadira helped Kayla to a quiet garden within the colony's reclaimed quarters, a rare patch of green nurtured beneath artificial suns. Kayla's eyes fluttered open, meeting Nadira's gaze. Though she could not speak, the child's expression was one of serene understanding, a silent vow that her pain had meaning. Nadira smiled through tears. You showed us all how to be human again. Ward stood nearby, watching the young girl, who had become a legend. Your suffering brought us here, he said quietly, but your courage will carry us forward. The colony began the slow process of rebuilding, torn infrastructure patched, broken families reunited, and a new council formed from those who had once been slaves but were now leaders. Ward took his place as one of many voices steering Darrow 6 toward a future shaped not by fear, but by hope and resilience. Months passed, and whispers of the uprising spread beyond the colony, inspiring other worlds shackled under the Dominion's rule. Kayla's neural signature, now controlled and sustained by Nadira's technology, was shared across networks, a beacon of liberation for all oppressed souls in the galaxy. One evening, as twin moons rose over the horizon, Ward stood alone atop a hill overlooking the colony. The stars above seemed brighter, as if the universe itself celebrated this victory. He thought of all who had fallen, all who had risen, and the child whose silent suffering had ignited it all. Freedom had come at a cost, but it was theirs, hard-won, and fiercely protected. And in the quiet hum of the night, Ward whispered a promise. We will never forget. We will never surrender. Because as long as one voice rises against tyranny, hope will live. The dawn of freedom had arrived, and with it a new chapter for humanity, one written not by rulers of terror but by the resilient hearts of those who dared to fight.